Welcome to the Recovery 2.0 online conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and today, well, I'm just thrilled to be speaking with Kia Miller. Kia is a yoga teacher who has been devoted to the path of yoga for over 25 years. She's a lead yoga and meditation teacher trainer who runs workshops, retreats, and trainings around the world. She has developed her own style of yoga called Radiant Body, which brings together Vinyasa, Kundalini Yoga, pranayama, and meditation. Kia, thank you so much for lending your voice, your presence, your experience, and your wisdom to the Recovery 2.0 community. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So, Kia, people will be curious to hear just a little bit about the story of how you got turned on to meditation. I know, as I know you, I've gotten a chance to understand that meditation is one of the most important things in your life. And how did that unfold for you? How did that come to be? Was it always that way?
It wasn't always that way, although when I reflect back, I understand that a meditative state was something that I found in nature when I was very young, but lost that connection. And when I first started practicing yoga when I was 15, I heard about meditation as well. But I thought about meditating for 10 years before I actually started. And really the reason being that I didn't know how. And it was overwhelming. And I didn't even know where to start. And at any point where I sat down and tried to do what I thought was meditating, my mind was so loud and noisy and distracted that I couldn't even fathom that it was possible. And so it seemed so very unattainable for me for a very long time. And it wasn't until I started to be taught within Kundalini Yoga some very specific meditation techniques that I started to understand what it was all about. And so my journey has progressed from there, from understanding that it's not about stopping your thoughts. It's ultimately about creating a very conscious relationship with the deepest part of you and starting to observe which patterns of thinking, of thoughts dominate your waking hours and how to start to change some of those patterns and promote some of the good, helpful patterns. So for me, the exploration of meditation has been a journey of starting to understand what it actually means to be a human, what it means to be somebody who has a mind and somebody who thinks and exists in this world. So it's the deepest kind of journey.
So many people find their way to the meditation mat preceded by some difficulty. There's some pain or a discomfort or an inability to be comfortable in one's own skin. Ultimately, was your curiosity about meditation fueled by necessity?
Good question. Yes, and a thirst to know more. I think I had gained so much through my asana practice, through my practice of postures and breath, that I'd cultivated already a certain level of calmness. So maybe my necessity wasn't as heightened as it would have been had I started meditating at the beginning. But for sure, the moment that I started to observe myself at the level of mind, I started to observe just how addicted I was on so many levels to so many different kinds of thinking.
Well, that's a critically important topic, so we'll stay right there for a moment. Help me to understand how you view the mind, what does it mean to have an addictive mind versus a non-addictive mind, or how is it that you perceive this thing that we're all trying to sort of wield and understand and manage at a better level?
Well, there's so many models of the mind that are available in the yoga tradition. So there's different perspectives in at how the mind works. But just to answer directly from your question of addictive thinking, there's patterns of thoughts that we have. So we'll have a thought about something. Sometimes that thought doesn't have very much of a charge, and it, like a popcorn, it comes up into your field of awareness. If you're not charged by it, if it's not got too much interest, it'll just like popcorn pop and disappear. But it's when those thoughts come up into your field of awareness that have some juicy connection to them, maybe resentment, maybe a deep desire, maybe an attachment, maybe an aversion, then we start to chew on it and we add more weight. An emotion gets involved. Maybe there's associations with that thought, and before we know it, it's like we got on a train, and now the train has become an express train, and it's gone way past any local destination, and now you're far up in Timbuktu, and you never planned to go there. But to me, that's like a train of addictive thinking. And what happens is often we choose those trains of addictive thinking because we're really uncomfortable in the moment. And so that offers us a level of distraction. And so for me, the practice of meditation is all about learning to get comfortable in the present moment, comfortable in my own skin, comfortable in what I'm perceiving, comfortable with these unconscious thoughts that come into consciousness. You see, the way the yoga tradition views this is there's an unconscious momentum that's propelling us through the majority of our lives. If we're not actually fully present in the moment, like we are now, you and me, and those who are listening, we're present. There's an evolutionary, really fresh energy here. But if we're not fully present in the moment, then we're in the unconscious mind. We're in the habituated unconscious aspect of ourselves, and we're making decisions based on decisions that we've made before, things that we've learned before, or things that we're constantly chasing after. And so there's this unconscious momentum that we are a part of. And when we start to meditate and do specific breath practices, we can begin to just become aware, what is the unconscious momentum that's driving my life? What is the unconscious desire under there that is driving my decisions? Why am I going off on that supercharged express train to Timbuktu when that's in my heart of hearts, I know that's not serving me? Why do I still continue to do this, and this behavior, even though I know that it's not serving me? And it's that presence in the moment where we're making these decisions from old behaviors.
Has it been your experience that both for yourself personally and the people that you work with and teach yoga and meditation to, that if meditation doesn't become a part of life, that unconscious momentum will just continue, that it doesn't just work itself out?
I would have to say, from my personal experience, unless you're in a process of self-reflection and self-correction, how can that stuff work it out? Now, there's different ways of doing that self-reflection and self-correction. Obviously, when we're in therapy, that happens. When we're in a conscious dialogue with another, in whatever way that therapeutic relationship shows up. But the coming to the place where we are starting to discern who the witness is that's witnessing this thing that we call life. If I'm caught in an emotional state, if I'm caught in a train of thinking, I'm not going to be in that seat of witness. I'm now identified with, I'm hungry, I need that food, I've got to get that food. I'm so identified with that emotion and that physical experience that I'm not able to just take a moment and witness. And the witness would say, well, wait, who's hungry right now? Are you really hungry? Maybe you just need to drink some water. That would be the sort of witnessing aspect that breaks us out of the unconscious momentum. Okay, now I'm in the witnessing aspect. Now I get to make a choice about what I do. Am I going to choose to eat that food even though I'm not hungry? Am I going to choose to take the drug even though I know that it's not serving me? Wait, there's a break here. There's a moment. And so the process of meditation, because it's about starting to learn to simply bear witness to your experience, then we can start to make these conscious little breaks in our behaviors and start to change, make different choices, in other words. Often we think there isn't another choice, but there's always another choice.
In my own personal experience with addiction, there have been periods in my life where truly it felt like the power of choice had been removed in that period of time, for that moment, because I was so trapped in unconscious, conditioned, the thought process, the thinking, and the behaviors that came from that kind of thinking. So it really does seem to me that the path of recovery, therefore, has to include meditation as a practice to break out of at least the mental affliction part of addiction.
Absolutely. And I think there's a way that you can start, anyone can start in little manageable bite-sized pieces that help them to make some progress. And in my experience, unless you have some level of direct experience of progress, you're not going to value or even invest much time and energy into something. So for me, at the beginning of meditation, I would observe a shift after doing some focusing technique or mantra, for example, in the Kundalini tradition, which is great, or some breath technique that would shift my energy enough that my mind would finally come to a place of stillness, and I would be not caught up in the usual drama and neuroses of my mind. So that started to offer me little glimpses of what a witness state is like, what it's like when we're not so self-identified, whatever way we're self-identified. I'm not enough, I'm an addict, I'm this, I'm that, whatever that may be. But in those moments of just pure fullness and presence, that gave me enough impetus to realize, wow, okay, there's something here. I want to keep this up. So I kept doing the Kriya practices, the activating breath practices that would create that level of stillness that started to give me a glimpse of the window of who I was if I wasn't what I think that I am or was. That makes sense. And then from there, I started to hone in more on the subtler, okay, now I'm just going to watch my breath. Watching my breath, watching my breath. Oh, catch myself thinking, watching my breath. Catch myself thinking, watching my breath. Okay, add another dimension. I'm watching my breath. Catch myself thinking, oh, what was that thought? Oh, planning thought. Gosh, I'm so invested in creating the perfect future. I want to plan everything so that life is perfect. So I invest so much time in the now, in my future. Some people are real past investors. There's a lot of those thoughts that come in that are related to past experience. So now I start to label my thoughts. That gives me, again, just a little bit of distance. If I've been able to label a thought, now how I'm not identified with that thought. Oh, planning. Oh, egoic thought, resentment, attachment. And so now I'm starting to create a really different relationship with thinking.
Hmm.
So that's profound. Just begin there.
Well, it also sounds like you're beginning a different relationship altogether with yourself.
Yes.
And I'm thinking now that on this path of transformation, moving out of addiction into recovery, and then, you know, moving on into areas where you're thriving in recovery, which is what we're hoping for. Again, it seems that there's just a regular process of recognizing thought and emotion without grabbing onto it, without being pulled around by it. Have you found that the upshot of your meditation all these years has allowed you to experience a different version of Kia Miller?
Without a doubt. And I will say that the most profound thing that's happened to me through this kind of self-inquiry and meditation is a deep compassion for myself and a deep compassion for the human condition. Because you asked earlier about sort of a model of the mind. Well, the mind is a super active place, and it's generating what Yogi Bhajan said, 1,000 thoughts per blink of the eye. There's a lot of thoughts coming through the field of our awareness. How do we sift through that? How do we create a level of clarity? And how can we learn, which we're not really taught to do in our schools, can we learn techniques to begin to hone and harness and focus the power of our mind so that it becomes a real force for good, as opposed to the place where we are constantly feeling distracted and scattered and chasing the next thing. The yogic model of the mind is that the five senses through which we're perceiving the world, the brain is interpreting the world, and for the most part, we tend to just be chasing through our senses. We hear something that stimulates a thought, a memory. Off we go. We smell something. Now it's coffee. I've awakened some deep craving in myself for coffee. Now I have to have coffee. Now I can't imagine that life could be good without that coffee. And so I've created this whole train of thinking. So there's the sensory mind, is the part of ourselves that identifies as I-ness, we call it. So now that's you could call it the egoic identity. It's the I-ness that says that rather than there's a rose in front of me, oh, I see the rose. So now there's that way that we identify the I-ness. And then there's a higher mind part. We call it in yoga the buddhi mind, but it's the witnessing part of yourself. It's the intelligent, discerning part of yourself that can make relevant decisions, and not decisions that come from the memory, which is another aspect of the mind, or not decisions that are coming for pure, immediate sensory gratification. So there's a whole model laid out within the yoga tradition about, how the mind operates. That's helpful, certainly on one level. That understanding, it was informative for me. But the greatest progress I made was that learning to come into full witness consciousness and starting to identify as the watcher, not the thinking, and then starting to make, as I mentioned earlier, that break in the momentum and different choices, and setting like a little simple task. Like one year for my New Year's resolution, I said to myself, I want to stop judging. I just don't want to judge anymore.
You call that simple?
No. I thought it was going to be simple. I just won't judge. So I got to the end of that first year, New Year's resolution, got to do it again. Won't judge. The end of that year, did it again. By the end of the third year, I'd been in a pretty dedicated way, just observing all the times I was in self-judgment and judgment of others, so much judgment. But I was getting to the point where I was catching the judgment as it arose. Sometimes the judgment would happen, I'd catch it, but I was more often catching the judgment as it was coming up in me. And then I recognized that there'd been progress there. And I started to see this plasticity of the mind, this conditioning of the mind that we all have, that there's a way through that conditioning. It just takes it's the one thought at a time, one thought at a time, one day at a time. And then we slowly, slowly, slowly start to break free of the conditioned idea that we have about what life is. What excited me about your conference this year is that your title is To See Things Differently. And to me, it's all about learning to see things differently, because we come into life with all this conditioning from our family, from our culture, from our own personal experiences, often those experiences happening when we're too young to be able to control them. And so we have this conditioned, automatic, unconscious response to life that's driving us. And so coming into a place where we can recognize the conditioning as it's coming up and make conscious choices. So for me, that was a 3-year journey with judgment. Do I still judge? Sure, I still judge. I still catch myself, but it's a very different relationship than what I had before. And it's also allowed me to be a lot more compassionate when I see people judging me or judging others around. I get to understand where that mechanism's coming from, that we're all subject to this, to our conditioning. We're all subject to the scattered nature of an untrained mind, that we're all subject to blocked emotional energy and old emotional coping patterns that are not serving us anymore. In order to sift through that, we've got to cultivate a kind of vitality, a kind of inner strength and tenacity, and a faith that there's a way through the fogginess, the uncontrolled nature of life of addiction. There's a way through it. And there's a way through it just observing one thought at a time, consciously choosing where we're placing our energy. Our thoughts with emotions create a real field of magnetic energy that is pulling towards us that same reflective energy that the thought and emotion have. So if we're not mindful, if we're not conscious, then we are negative thinking. Emotions get charged that negative thinking. And now we become that person who's saying, well, bad things just keep always happening to me. And life sucks. And fine for you, you're lucky, but this is my lot. And it's the understanding that everything that's happening to us as adults is coming from what we're generating from the inside, i.e., what we're thinking and how we're feeling. It takes a radical self-honesty, a commitment, which is what I love about people in recovery, that there's a commitment to honesty, and there is a commitment to self-reflection. And that's where this real work happens, because the moment we get honest with ourselves, now there's a window. Now we can start to access the witness and reflect and start to make the small but profound changes that shift the trajectory of our lives, that bring in something that's reflecting a different vibration.
Mm. Thank you so much. From a totally practical level, do you find and have you found that location and geography make a difference in a person's ability to meditate?
It's such a good question. Yes, when you're in a quiet nature spot and there's more pranic energy or vibrant, there's a different frequency in the vibration around you, it's definitely easier to meditate. I mean, if you just look at it on the most practical level there, when we're in nature, we tend to relax. Our awareness easily expands out into the environment. We become more perceptive to the little sounds and shifts around us. When we're in a city environment and there's a lot of discordant noises and unpredictable sounds around us, it's much harder to settle in. Plus, we're in a very congested city environment. You have all the electromagnetic energy that is also impacting us. So, yes, this is why I love the practice of Kundalini Yoga. It's why I love the practices where we do strong breath work with dynamic movement that shift our energetic vibration and frequently profoundly enough that we are released from whatever is around us. We get to glimpse, we get to transcend the space that we're in. We get to transcend the environment and the externally and internally and open up to a new space. From there, doesn't matter where you are. The practice of meditation becomes super accessible. And then ultimately, the practice of meditation is creating this state of continuous awareness. Whenever we catch ourselves, wherever we are, we catch ourselves in negative thinking. Wow, I'm negative thinking. Catch ourselves spinning a resentment wheel. Oh, God, there I was again. I'm in resentment. Catch ourselves in craving. Wow, I'm craving. Wait, what in me, where in me am I disconnected right now that I feel that something from the outside is going to fix that disconnection? What can I do right now that helps me to create the inner connection that I'm so craving? So that, just that inquiry, and then placing your attention at the heart center, breathing into the heart center, allowing a moment for all the discordant energy to start to settle. You know, in the Heart Math Institute, the study done at Stanford, I think it is, they talk about that journey of incoherence between the mind and the heart to coherence between the mind and the heart, harmony, in other words. It just takes 3 minutes. Catch yourself craving, catch yourself in a unwanted state of being. Come back to your heart. Breathe there. Open to the possibility of something else, of something different. And allow that possibility in. And your resonance, your frequency immediately starts to shift. This is what we have to recognize, that we are that powerful. And that's how we put a little breaker in the unconscious momentum, and we allow ourselves little windows of opportunity. Oh, in this moment that I've come conscious, now I have the capacity to take an action that is going to be evolutionary in nature, that's going to take me out of the past, that's going to open me to something more than more of the same. And that's what's so fascinating and exciting and inspiring to me about the yoga tradition and practice and what is shared, is that this is ultimately where we start to lead to. If we don't want more of the same, we have to change our behavior and our relationship with the present moment. In order to do that, we have to start to stop that train of thinking that's keeping us bound in some past negative, traumatic, whatever you want to call it, experience. So it's exciting to me.
Beautiful. It's super exciting, and it's inspiring how inspired you are. I was so inspired by how inspired you are that I decided to marry you. So that says something. Can you speak a little to the power of meditating in groups? What are the differences between meditating as an individual versus in a group? What's been your experience there?
Yogi Bhajan referenced that group consciousness is a vital part of the journey from individual to universal consciousness. So from a limited perception of self to an unlimited perception of self, that one necessary step in the middle of that was group consciousness. And what I've experienced about group consciousness is that when somebody in the group is elevated and super connected, that person draws everyone up to the same place. Yogi Bhajan used to say it only takes one person in the group to be connected in that up and down plane, which I'm losing the word right now, vertical plane. It only takes one person. Sometimes the mind just slips away. Only takes one person in that vertical plane and everybody gets drawn into it. And what I found about group practice is that, especially if you've done some level of Kriya or dynamic movement practice with breath and sound beforehand, that creates a cohesion and a harmonization in the group auric field, the group energy. Then naturally in the meditative space, the whole frequency gets lifted and expanded. And so for those people who haven't yet had a successful experience on their own, they get glimpses of it within the group field. And so, yes, it has relevance. And I think another level of relevance is that we're social beings as human beings. And we're so strengthened and fortified by community. I think that's, why churches have been so successful. Community centers. There's a deep craving in all of us to be seen and to see and to share experience and to share values. And so when we come into group meditation, there's that feeling of being buoyed by those around us.
Thank you. Can you speak a bit? I know you have a tremendous love of mantra. And I'm wondering if, for the listeners here, you can speak to the power of words, the power of mantra, and the difference that has made for you in your personal evolution.
Great. So there's two parts there, right? The power of a mantra and then the power of words themselves. I'll start with mantra. And what I want to say here is that I just thought it was so weird when I started mantra, especially in the Kundalini tradition. I'd heard some of the Sanskrit mantras before when I was in India, and I'd absolutely loved them and been drawn to them. But I had that sort of fear of indoctrination and some kind of religion. And so I had to create my own direct experience relationship with mantra before I could fully embody it. And now it's a major part of my practice. I've recognized the value of it. And so to start, I think doing simple mantras as a way to focus your conscious mind and to start to harmonize the mind and shift your brain frequency it's such a powerful thing to do. Whether you're chanting Om, you're chanting Sat Nam, or whatever the simple practice is, the moment you start to use your breath with sound, you start to change the frequency of your brain. You start to become more open, more harmonized. So there's that. And then when I started to learn more about mantra and came to the understanding and the recognition of the power of different frequencies of sound, that some frequencies just have a certain potency to them. And then the understanding that the yogic sages and saints who shared these initial mantras that have been coming down for thousands of years throughout the lineage of humanity, that these sounds, these mantras, when they were first uttered, they were uttered from beings who were in such a sublime, connected state that they had that kind of understanding of the totality of what is. So every mantra is like a little equation that, when reflected upon, when we chant those sounds, we start to attune to the frequency of those who originally spoke them. So that's a much more in detail way to think about it, but that's fascinating to me. And my own direct experience is that before I could develop the capacity for self-reflection that I've been talking about, that witness state of mind, I needed to chant mantra. I needed to chant it out loud because it was the only way I could get the busyness and the chaos of the crowd that exists in my mind to actually start to harmonize and come to a place of coherence where I could have an experience beyond that insanity that I was calling my mind, not recognizing that there is a higher mind that the yogis reference. And when we quiet the insanity, the higher mind is present, that intuitive mind is present. So mantra for me was the gateway into understanding the mind and starting to then cultivate the relationship with the witness, so that now I can really hold that space and just be aware that thoughts are thoughts, but they're not me. I don't have to be identified with them. I can create distance from the ones that are disturbing to me and unhelpful. I can create intimacy with the ones that are helpful and promote a way of being that is in alignment with my core values. So mantra is a very powerful tool. Sound is a powerful tool for attunement. And then words are considered the most powerful thing that we have in the yoga tradition. It's how we express, it's how we communicate, it's how we create at the highest level through words, through sound. And so the saying in the yoga tradition is that if we become really exquisitely skillful at the words we choose, when we choose them, how we speak them, then our words will start to take on the most enormous power, that everything we speak shall manifest. And so that's a very lofty goal, but really underlying that is that words have extraordinary power. When we think something, it has a certain magnetism to it. There's a certain power to it. When we verbalize it, now that power has become exponentially greater. There's a certain, that frequency of thought has now become the frequency of sound. And so learning to catch ourselves before that resentment is spoken, the anger is spoken, the word that may hurt, that we would later regret that we said. Learning to take that pause, recognize, wow, I'm really angry. I best just step away for a moment, cool down, come back and re-engage. Or wow, I'm very resentful right now. Whatever that emotion is that wants to be expressed through words, because there's a instantaneous feeling of gratification when we say something that's hurtful or damaging. But then the afterglow of that is really toxic. Yeah.
Have you ever seen that from anyone close to you?
I've seen that from myself.
Just curious, because you seem to be talking right to me. That harkens back to that moment of pause that we spoke about at the beginning, and just creating a second of pause can change the entire world.
It really can.
Yeah,
it really can. The more we bring those pauses into our life, the more potent our life becomes. Because without pauses, there's no time for integration and reflection on what just occurred. So then in that integration and reflection, there's an opportunity for understanding to arise as to whether, is that something I want to repeat or not? Or am I going to take that energy forward into the next thing that I do? So taking these moments of pause between activities, between conversations, between bouts of intensive thinking, it's all the moment where you come back to how do I feel in my body right now? What are my feelings expressing to me about what I've just been involved with? Okay, how do I connect back? If I'm feeling off center, how do I just connect back into that source of myself? And trusting that everything that we need in any given moment, any question that we have, the answer for it is here. The answer for it lies in those pauses when we actually get to stop with all the noise, to stop with all the grasping. That person will solve my problem. This person will solve my problem. I'll just take that supplement. That'll do it, or whatever it may be. It's like, wait, just pause, slow down, get still, take some breaths. Wow, I was really caught up. God. Okay, I'll do better next time, right? Take a moment, recognize, well, that wasn't serving me, that line of thinking. Okay, choose your line of thinking. This is where it gets really exciting. We get to choose what we think about. Isn't that radical? Wow. You mean I don't need to stew in my own negativity? Wow. I can choose something different. Cultivating, remembering, having the vitality enough to make that choice. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You and I have spent quite a bit of time in India. And we've gotten to be around a lot of incredible teachers. And we've even gotten to be around people that you and I have referred to as masters. Can you speak to why you have decided as a teacher to run many, if not most, of your trainings from India?
That's a multi-leveled decision, really, that I made or make continually. There's a couple of fundamental elements in it, and one which you just referenced, which is that there's something about being in the presence of masters. And when I say masters here, I mean somebody who is really in absolute clarity and neutrality, not living in a duality of misunderstanding of who they are or what they are. So when you're around people who really have that deep sense of self, not the bravado, egoic sense of self, but the deep sense of who they are, that consciousness is contagious. When you talked about group energy earlier, like that consciousness is contagious. I want to be around it as much as I can. I want to introduce people who have been turned on to yoga through my teachings. I want to introduce them to that level of mastery. And so it's of interest to me always to be under the spiritual umbrella of those beings who are further along the path than I am. And it's of interest of me to introduce others to those beings and make their teachings available. And it's also of interest to me because it's also of interest to me to take people to India, and particularly to the Himalayas, to where the saints and sages have been for centuries, because there's a certain unified energy, there's a certain frequency of consciousness there that when you practice, when you meditate, it's palpable. You can tap into it. In fact, on this topic of meditation, my first real experience of what meditation is took place in India. And it happened. It's like you can't force yourself to go to sleep. You can't force yourself to meditate. You can create the internal condition for it to happen, but we don't control when it happens or how it happens. In truth, when we say to meditate, what we're talking about is focusing techniques. But a true state of meditation is not something that we do. It happens. It's grace. And that happened to me in India. And it just falling into a state of grace, of a state of being, of pure contentment, stillness, aware of one's surroundings, but all craving melts away. There's that sense that all that is needed is right here. There's a sense of being fully resourced. So that experience really clued me into the power of the unified field in that area and a desire to take people there. It's not that you can't reach those states of grace and experience anywhere that you are, but there's a certain frequency there. There's a certain devotion in the culture. There's a certain the traditions of yoga are infused with the culture, and so there's a closeness that's really interesting to me.
That's exciting. What you described there, that falling into that meditation, that state of meditation, which, by the way, I've had that experience with you in India, really, to me, in my direct experience, is the opposite of addiction.
Yeah.
Like literally, if you could see on a spectrum, all the way over here is chronic or severe addiction. You're 100% identified with mind and you're caught up. And over here is just the absolute, just opposite of that. That's the state of meditation. Yeah. And I have a great desire, as you do, to turn as many people onto that as possible.
Yeah.
Especially those people who have struggled with addiction and have known the pain and suffering of the opposite of that. So I was wondering if we could just, we're running a little bit out of time now, unfortunately, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to our upcoming training for those who might be watching that might want to come. And also we'll finish with any other thoughts that you want to share with folks.
The desire for me, my motivating desire in life, is to empower people with the techniques within the yoga tradition that are so powerful and impactful that they break through the hypnosis of the addicted mind, of the caught up mind. And whether you think you're an addict or not, all of us are. We all have addictive trains of thinking. Some are mild, some are intermediate, and some are really intense. There are practices designed by people who really understood the totality of what it is to be human, to be physical beings, energetic beings, emotional beings, spiritual beings. These practices that are designed specifically to help to cut through the hypnosis and the ways we're caught up, and to create an integrated state of being. My interest is to share those practices with people, not only for their own personal development, although it has to start there, but to encourage others to share these teachings, because there's so much power in them, and there's such a need for them globally. As human beings, we have become so disconnected from ourselves, from each other, and from, on a global level, definitely disconnected on the deep levels, the meaningful levels. And so how do we develop that connection? How do we recreate it? That is the business of yoga, this process of reintegrating, of creating wholeness, of coming back to our neutrality, and of recognizing the power and capacity that each and every one of us has to not create the same as what our parents did, to not create the same in our cultures as we keep creating, or with our countries that we keep creating. There's a potential for all of us to change, to make a quantum shift from where we are to a way of being that is not caught in addiction, in pain, in suffering, in revenge, in resentments. And all of that comes possible when we use these mind-body practices, when we use these somatic practices to start to break through the momentum. So that's why I've really developed trainings and immersive experiences. And that's why, thankfully, we are doing this one together as an opportunity for people to come and to learn the tools, to have direct experience of these practices so that they can share them. There's a need. There's a great hole that needs to be filled. There's people's hearts that need to mend. There's people's brains that need to come back online. There's families that, can be healed and brought back together through these practices. So
that's in India.
Yes.
in October, 200-hour teacher training. And so the invitation is there for anyone called to a deeper level of study and practice. Come be with Kia and I. We only really have a few spots left, but if that calls to you, you let us know. You find us, and we'll rope you in the best way.
And I just want to say here, whether you come to a training or not, wherever you are at in your life, there's a relevance to these mind, body, energy practices for you. They're not for somebody else. They're for you. These practices can meet you where you are at. And I think that's important, because in the West right now, we think of yoga as this athletic practice where you have to be able to, stand on your head and do cartwheels and flip upside down at the drop of a hat. But no, that's not what this is about. This is about learning very simple techniques that can shift your energy, break the addictive mindset, and awaken you to the light within you, the capacity within you that somewhere along the line you forgot, or you identified with something other than. The purpose of these practices is to dissolve all the ways that we have covered our potential and ourself, and start to awaken us to the possibility and the potential of who we are.
So beautiful. Well, Kia, I'm so incredibly grateful to you for your time and sharing your love and your passion for meditation with this community. How can people find you?
You can find me through my website, kiamiller.com. I lead retreats. I teach on yogaglow.com, so hundreds of classes there and trainings. And as you can see, I'm ridiculously passionate about yoga. Tommy here has to live with me in this state of being because it's my life. It's my lifestyle, and I find incredible freedom in that, and incredible vibrancy in my life because of that. And
it's an absolute blessing in my life too.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, so much love and gratitude. Thank you so much for sharing. And I look forward to giving you a big hug and a kiss in just about 2 seconds here.
Fabulous.
Love you. Thank you, hon.
Namaste. Thank you.
Sat Nam.